A very warm welcome back to the live studio here at Nordic Business Forum, Norway. My name's Maddie Savage, and I'll be guiding you through our next set of interviews. We would love for you to get involved on the hashtag NBF Norway. That's the hashtag for throughout the day. For anyone joining us for the first time, this is a live stream where I interview some of the people coming off the main stage or about to go onto the main stage, and other key business leaders and thought leaders who are in Oslo for this conference. So hello to you watching online, and hello to those of you here just outside the main auditorium, where we've already had some fantastic speakers during the day. And our first guest just off the stage within the last couple of minutes, swept into the studio, is Morten Hansen, professor at Berkeley, University of California, with a specialism in leadership and innovation. And you've been on the main stage talking about the future of work. Some of our viewers will have caught that, some won't. So just summarize your key message.
Yeah, in terms of how we're going to succeed in this world that is full of uncertainty and change and hardship, really, it's a tough competition out there. And somewhat counterintuitively, one of the key things is to do less and obsess. Meaning be very, very good at prioritizing on the few things that matters and go all in and obsess on those. And a lot of people do the opposite. They do more things, but you actually have to do the opposite. It's a principle that we found in our study of 5,000 people, looking at those who succeeded versus those who did not.
It goes against this idea that I think is perhaps more prominent in the US and the UK than here in the Nordics, but this idea that you need to be busy all the time. People want to feel like they're being productive, and they want to be seen to be being productive. Yeah. So how do you match these templates that you have with the sort of wider societal perceptions?
Yeah. We have these myths of what it means to succeed out there, and they're wrong. I mean, one is that you need to work 100 hours a week to succeed, and it's flat out wrong. And the other one is what you're saying, busyness. I mean, I meet people who, they are proud of how busy they are. I mean, even people saying how many freaking fly miles they have racked up, as if flying is an accomplishment. Flying is not an accomplishment. So, but we have the wrong measures, really. And I talked about that on the main stage, that you need to change the metrics. The number of meetings, the number of cold calls, the number of customer visits, these are not the right metrics. They're just business metrics. And you need to shift to more, what is it that I do that create the most value, and focus on those things.
Clearly that is something that needs to come from both leaders as well as employees. What can each of those do to focus on this approach, in your opinion?
Yeah, no, leaders have a huge responsibility. They need to, instead of adding things to the to-do list for their team, they need to take things away from the to-do list. If your team is doing 10 projects, it doesn't mean that it's a better team if they do more. Maybe call that list down to the 5 most important, and making sure those are done extremely well. That's a leadership job. And again, leaders are sort of going the other way often. But the best leader with the best performance, they tend to be very good at prioritizing.
It's easy to say cut your projects in half, though, because that could potentially cut your earnings in half.
Yeah, that is where courage comes in. And I gave an example of some companies done the opposite. They actually had incredible revenue growth because they focus on the things that matters the most. We sort of get wasted with this marginal stuff, believing incremental revenue is the way to go. But it takes away the things that can really drive revenue growth. And then for individuals, it's tough. If you have a boss, I call them do more bosses, you know, which is a boss that tends to add to the to-do list. And if your boss is a do more boss, you know, they just give you more stuff to do. I mean, you're working flat out on 2 projects, and your boss shows up in your cubicle and says, hey, can you take on this 3rd thing as well? And it's tough. The best people, they manage up. They say to the boss, you know, if you want me to do 3 projects, which one should I finish first? I can't do them all in the same quality. Which one is most important? You're sort of trying to put it back on the boss. Sometimes that works out well, and that's what individuals need to do. And not just say yes. I believe
how do you say no? How do you say no then?
That's how you say no. You don't say, you know, I don't want to do the 3rd project, sorry boss. You put the prioritization back on the boss, because the job of a manager is to prioritize. I mean, let's face it. So it's always pushing it back and not just accepting. It's sort of being assertive instead of just saying yes. And it's hard. early on in my career, I thought, well, you can't say no. So, you just have to say yes and just work the weekends. And it's the wrong approach because you won't perform at your best.
I mean, there's been a lot of discussions around how younger members of the workforce, millennials, are more likely to push for flexible time, push for their own passions, and are perhaps more confident than we were 10 years ago at actually saying, no, I can't do that. Has your research touched on different generational differences?
Yeah, I think there are a couple. I think one is that they want more flex time. They're willing to give all the time and the effort, but it has to be on something that is not bullshit jobs. That's important. It's not something that is trivial, that is really key, and it is connected to a purpose. I mean, why are we doing this? Why are we shipping this product? What is it going to create of value? Or is it just selling more t-shirts? And that's not good enough.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about leaders then, and what they can do, and why some leaders really thrive and others don't. It is an era of disruption now, where things are changing very rapidly in business. What do you think the skills are that push certain leaders to survive and be a cut above the rest, and for others to flounder in this climate?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that lies in innovation. And earlier on today in the VIP section, I talked a great deal about how you should innovate. So it's not how innovative you are, it is a process of innovation. And because you have to renew yourself. And I was on the stage with the innovation head of the Norwegian Postal Service. And they are very innovative. I mean, imagine that, like a 400-year-old organization. I mean, you would have thought that shipping mail should be a dying business. But they are having a process of innovation where first a set of experimentations, very important, to start with new things and try them out. And the great thing about experimentation is that they're not that expensive. They don't have to cost much if they fail. And you can get going with those. So they start experimenting with digital stamps. That's interesting. People don't want physical stamps anymore, they want digital stamps. That turned out to be something people wanted, and then you scale it. So it's a process of trying things out, kill that which doesn't work, keep what works, and scale it, put money behind it. Great leaders today, they have a process like that. And it's not that difficult. It's about behaviors. It's about doing things a little differently.
What about when things go really wrong? Times of chaos. You've written about this in one of your books. Times of financial collapse or shifting markets. What really makes some companies and leaders stand out and survive those times?
The worst thing is paralysis, which is we're hoping for better time. It will turn. Let's hunker down.
Which is positive thinking, but actually in business that's not always the right
That's a great point.
Approach.
It is positive, and you rally the troops, and you say, hey, let's go out and sell harder, meet the quota, without understanding that usually the reason is that something is fundamentally changing in your industry, and you are not on top of those things. And it requires a leader to have, what we talk about, confront the brutal facts. To sit down saying, these are the reality. Our products are lousy, our customers hate us, and things are just going down the drain. It's not about selling harder, it is about changing. And then leaders at that point in time, I mean, you don't want to panic either, but you really want to start having pretty drastic measures. I mean, one of them is, Steve Jobs coming back to Apple in '97. Apple was 2 months away from bankruptcy. And he took charge, he laid off people, and he changed the product line very quickly. And you need those kind of drastic measures.
Do you have any examples of the other direction, of companies and leaders that couldn't pull through and what they might have done wrong?
Yeah, there are plenty of those examples. IBM was in the mainframe industry, and then the personal computer came along, and they thought it was just a little toy that people wanted to play with. They didn't see the disruption coming, so they just said, let's just play more mainframes. It's an historic example. Hewlett-Packard, came into hard times just because of the same thing, but in the last 10 years, they didn't see the fundamental changes going on. In technology, and every company today is sort of affected by digital transformation and technology. If you don't make those changes, you're not just losing 5% of revenue, you're losing your business.
What do you think the main differences are between the US market and the Nordics when it comes to innovation and thinking outside the box?
So I think we talked a little bit about sort of this too much consensus-driven in a decision-making. I think another one is speed. In the Nordics, too slow. Things take too long time. In the US, I live in the Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Things move fast. You don't have 2 years to kind of do your product development. It's got to be 3 months. It's going to be a sprint. And things are changing quite a bit. So that's the other one. The third one is you really need to think bigger, right? Not start to say, I can crack the market in Norway. Okay, that's almost not a market. It's 4 million people. Think about, okay, I start here, but how do I make a move in Europe or in the United States? We have some great exceptions. I mean, Spotify is a wonderful, contrarian example. Unfortunately, there are few who think like that.
You mentioned, though, that in the US, things are moving more quickly. And here in the Nordics, we are famous for having a better work-life balance, longer holidays, parental leave, working less, which was kind of your original point, that we need to work less and work smarter. So how can businesses in the Nordics match up to that speed while also trying to hold on to and preserve those things? Should they be trying to?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in Silicon Valley, let's face it, people do a lot of wrong things. And one of them is this idea of working, 90 hours. And we have research on that. Beyond sort of 60 hours a week, you're actually performing less well. It goes negative. So this myth that you should be sitting and writing software code at night, it's wrong. You're just making a lot of bugs into the software. So we don't have to work these crazy hours, but we have to prioritize. In the Silicon Valley, startups are really good at sharply focusing on one thing, one big market, one pain point, solve it with a product. And if we can do that, I think we can achieve both a great performance through do less than obsess and work-life balance. And in the last chapter in my book, Great at Work, I show it with data, that those who master this principle of do less than obsess, they also report that they have better work-life balance.
How does that pan out in your life and your work? What do you prioritize, or what are you not so good at prioritizing?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I said it on the stage. I'm pretty good at saying yes to many things. I could be much better at prioritizing. And it's a constant struggle, but I am trying, and I'm saying no to a number of things. I'm getting better. I'm trying to learn from the great examples, the masters in the book that we studied. But I think for all of us, it's a constant struggle. But it's a different way of thinking about life, is to say it is better to do fewer things than more things, and to do them well. And I think it's actually a route to having a fulfilling and happy life, because you're not so stressed out. You are not having all these problems of burnout either.
Okay. Do you think there is anything that we can take from this for people working for themselves, self-employed people? Yeah. Is it harder to say no when you don't have that structure and that boss, and what can those people do?
It is harder because you have to pay the bills this month. You can't just have the luxury of waiting. But it's also a trap to say yes to too many things, because you start saying yes to things that may be outside of your comfort zone. You may not be so good at them. Either you do bad work, or you have to spend a lot of time trying to do good work. And so you want to try not to do that. There's a great example in the book about a woman called Susan Bishop, who was running her own startup in the headhunting business in New York. And she did exactly the opposite. She started saying yes to too many clients, and it tanked her business. And she had to have sort of like in the moment of epiphany, saying, I'm going to go back to basics. I'm going to do less than obsess. And then the business turned around again. It's a lesson for all of us. It's hard to do.
Yeah. Well, some great insights for us. Your books, great by choice, great at work. People can get more insights from them there, and also a lot of information online at your website as well. You can do the quiz, which I did earlier, which showed that I was very bad at saying no to things and definitely need to think better at smart working. But thanks very much for joining us. Morten Hansen, professor at the University of Berkeley, University of California. Thanks very much for being one of our first guests here in the live studio. So welcome to any of you who've just joined us on the live stream, and also to those of you joining us here in the auditorium just outside the theatre, where the main speakers have been up on the stage. And we've got a new guest coming into place now. Welcome. Thanks very much for being here. This is Sahar Hashemi, entrepreneur and best-selling author. You're going to be on the stage much later during the day, so we can have hopefully a little bit of a taster of what's to come. But I also want to pick up on some other more personal topics. So you are something of a classic entrepreneur, really. You made a name for yourself building a business called Coffee Republic in the UK, where I'm from. I spent some of my teenage years in some of your earliest stores. Why did you come up with the idea? Why did you feel a gap in the market? I mean, there wasn't really a coffee culture in the UK in the 90s.
I mean, just really simply, I went to New York, and I'm always on some sort of a weird diet, so I remember it was in the early 90s, and I came across New World Coffee, which is a predecessor of these new style coffee bars, and I fell in love with it as a customer. So I wanted to drink skinny lattes for myself, and that was really the idea. So I didn't think there was a gap in the market. It's just that there was something I wanted as a customer, and it wasn't there. And that was the sort of genesis of the idea, really. And then, of course, once I researched the market, I realized, I suppose this is what people call a gap, because what I'm wanting as a customer is not there.
So at that time, there weren't other major chains operating on a large scale in the UK. Starbucks was kind of its early days.
No, Starbucks hadn't come. We opened in 1995, our first store.
So a few years
Starbucks
before.
didn't come, till 97 or 98, We were the UK's first coffee bar chain,
What do you think made it do so well?
It doesn't do that well right now, but the reason why we were able to grow it is because we were really passionate as a customer. We really believed in it, and we had a real startup mindset. We just loved as a customer to bring this idea to the UK, and we just went for it, and we focused on every detail. And a lot of the stuff Morten was talking about earlier, you kind of really focus on that customer experience and keep all the other stuff out. And we managed to grow it from 0 to 110 in 5 years.
Yeah, a very, very quick and successful start. What were the challenges for you?
Well, the challenges are obviously with anything new. It's kind of with any innovation, what you've got doesn't exist, what you're looking for. So suppliers didn't exist. People thought it was a really stupid idea. Bank managers didn't want to give us a bank loan.
What were their critiques of it at the time?
Well, they were just, for example, the most obvious critique was you sort of opening a chain of coffee bars in the United Kingdom. Do you not realize that what we're famous for in the United Kingdom is tea? So the idea was like, who the hell brings coffee to a nation of tea drinkers? Like, that just doesn't make sense. And of course it doesn't make sense. But when I had done some research, I kind of did a tiny bit of the sort of library research. We were a nation of tea drinkers, but basically we used to drink 7 times more tea than we drank coffee. But by the time I sort of researching, we were drinking only 4 times more tea. So it was going from 7 times more tea to 4 times more. So I could see. And that time as well, it was just the whole sort of EasyJet, cheap travel across Europe. People were traveling much more in the UK, so I just knew that, by the more time they spend in Europe, the more they will follow the coffee drinking habits of Europeans.
So starting to, get influenced by our neighbours, and I guess different food trends were coming as well, so people were becoming a bit more open.
It was a really special time. I think it was because of that sort of advent of the cheaper travel that it was really getting people to kind of get out more, and it was just inevitable that the Europeans drank so much more than us. It was inevitable that it was going to seep in.
So it wasn't easy to get investment and money from banks. How did you go about funding things?
Well, we got rejections from 39 bank managers. The 40th one said yes. We just, a lot of what I would talk about later, bootstrapping. Bootstrapping means being, incredibly resourceful, and in a way incredibly imperfect as well. And that's the only way to get things done, because if you try to get things done perfectly and through the normal channels, innovation there's no room for innovation in a normal channel, because the channels are for the old stuff. So a lot of bootstrapping, a lot of kind of taking the side roads.
Can you give us some examples? Because I think often when we talk about bootstrapping, people think, well, does that just mean you don't pay yourself, or you do 5 jobs in the company instead of 1? What are the sort of tangible things that you can
it's a really
present
good question.
to us?
Funny enough, what I'll be showing later was, for example, when I went to New York to copy the idea, I was trying to take pictures of the coffee bar, but the manager obviously, didn't let me because the idea was really catching on in New York. So my bootstrapping solution was I had a couple of cousins. I went there the following day, this time with my cousins. And this time we pretended as if we were completely innocent New York tourists, taking innocent tourist snapshots of each other. So that she couldn't say, don't take a picture of coffee bar. She couldn't tell where and you will see the pictures, like half my cousins' heads in the picture, but you'll fully see everything. So, and we ended up, for example, nicking our first employees from Pret a Manger because we knew Pret a Manger had a great training manual. And we asked them to bring the training manual with them. So that's bootstrap. The thing is, people bootstrap in their normal life. We're always bootstrapping. You know what I mean? We're always trying to put this and this together. It's just that we're not used to bootstrapping at work. And so I think what entrepreneurs are forced to do is put stuff outside of their work into their working life because there's no other choice. But you know what I mean? So, before, I think we compartmentalize work and life. And I think the startup ideas and work and life really coming together.
Is it easier or harder now to steal ideas, as you put it, and take ideas when 10, 20 years down the line, so many things have been tried already. It's so easy to just look online and see what's been done. So what are your reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier, when I sort of say, the reason I tell the bootstrapping story is it was before Google. So, before, I would have just copied, the whole planogram. But, there's something seeing ideas and knowing what to do, and there's something actually doing it is very, very different. It's sort of, it's thousands of people have told me, oh God, we had the coffee bar idea. But it just, there was nothing special about what we did. It's just that we did it. That's the only difference. And I think, the problem now we've got is there's so much information, but you've actually got to do stuff. And, stuff works. This morning I got my coffee from Joe and the Juice. That's a completely new stuff. Who would have
smoothie
thought?
bar, for anyone that hasn't been there.
Exactly. I'm sure it starts in Scandinavia?
Yeah,
I think
it's a Scandinavian brand.
I think they're a Scandinavian one.
Yeah.
So that's just, who would have thought there's room for someone to actually make fresh juice and coffee and a couple of basic sandwiches. So, there's always room. There's always a gap being created because stuff changes and you've got to have your eye out to see where the gap is.
Let's talk about exiting. So you decided to sell all or part of Coffee Republic?
All 2001, yeah.
Why?
Stupid, being really stupid. We thought entrepreneurs have a sell-by date. We thought, you're a startup and then the startup phase is over. And that's really, that was the sort of thing, is that you sort of move on and you give the company to grown-ups who know how to run a company.
So you felt there was someone out there potentially better than you to do it?
Yeah, but there were managers and professionals out there that run big companies, and that entrepreneurs should only start companies, they can't run companies. And that was the really old thinking back then. But, that's what we did, and we sort of, gave the company away to professional managers. And, 8 years after we left, the company went into administration, and you don't really see Coffee Republic around anymore, which is extraordinarily sort of sad for us.
Yeah.
And they're really a shadow of their former selves. So it's kind of very much, that's the lesson I learned, and that's why I wrote my new book, Startup Forever, and that's what I'm going to be speaking about, because a startup is not a phase you grow out of. In fact, it's a phase you should try really hard to maintain and really hold on to, because as a company gets bigger and you get more successful, it's difficult to keep that startup naivety and that startup resourcefulness. But you've really got to try to, because it's really worth it. And in this world, we're all in startups now, so everyone's got to keep that startup feeling.
And it's interesting because so often when we talk about startups, we're talking about tech, and there can be an argument for exiting if your tech might become redundant or overtaken. But when you're talking about something like coffee bars, I mean, there's still a need for them now. Competitors came and did something similar, so it wasn't anything that was wrong with the idea that it was going out of date. It was more the
and I think if your tech becomes redundant or whatever, I think exiting would not be the option because no one would buy it off you. So you sort of,
but,
exactly.
you know, thinking ahead. So what would be your advice for entrepreneurs in terms of an exit strategy? Would you say to cling on as long as you can, or how do they figure out the right timing?
I come across a lot of entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs get quite tired, quite fatigued. It's quite relentless. And I always say find someone to do the stuff, because you can't do everything. Obviously an entrepreneur cannot, maybe you don't have the skills to manage 1,000 people. We didn't. But what we should have done was have someone to do that, but someone who's got an understanding of the value an entrepreneur has, that customer connection, that sort of DNA feeling, that passion, that love. And not to discount that. Just because you don't know how to manage 1,000 people doesn't mean you're not valuable. And it's just a question of how you make that work. And I think if you get a great leader, manager who knows how to deal with people, who can manage people well, but also understands the value of passion, that's where you need to get to. Whereas before it was sort of either or, you were sort of all passion and then all professional. And in this world, it's got to be passion and professionalism mixed together.
Yeah. So Morten Hansen was talking a little bit about this as well, the key skills that he thinks are necessary for a leader. What would you summarize them as?
I think, one of the only ones is a leader understanding the customer, the end recipient of what they do. That's absolutely critical. It's the start of everything, because without that, you're not going anywhere. You're just sort of managing people in a vacuum, in a silo. So putting all the focus of the organization on the external world, where the customer, who actually pays the bills and pays the salaries, is. I would say that is the most critical. And then it's getting rid of the obstacles which get in the way of customers.
Okay. Your work more recently has also been focusing on intrapreneurship. So a lot of our audience might know this concept, but for those who don't, the chance to be entrepreneurial within a bigger organization. So tell us a little bit about that and what you're going to be focusing on a bit more later during the day.
Yeah, well, I think very much on what we discussed is it's the lessons I learned that a startup is something that you hold on to as you get big. And, before, the world of a big company and the world of a startup used to be completely different, because a big company existed and quite a lot of comforts. You had your channels, things didn't change much. You didn't have that level of disruption. Startups were in this sort of crazy, sort of wavy waters, and the still waters were for big companies. Now big companies are in the same wavy, choppy waters as startups are. So they've got to start thinking like a startup, and yet there are a huge amount of myths around the startup mindset. So today, I think when I speak later on, for me, it's just about busting the myths. And I think there are 6 really easy things how to have a startup mindset in whatever organization, public sector, private sector you work for, whatever size. And they start with the customer, and it's about removing all the obstacles. So.
Okay, well, we'll be hearing some more information on all of those when you're on the main stage. Any final reflections on Nordic Business Forum, your time in Oslo?
No, gosh, well, I'm just very much looking forward to it. I was in Stockholm yesterday, and the energy is amazing. And I find always when I speak to Scandinavian countries, I find the level of innovation, the need to learn, the enthusiasm, it's actually infectious. So it's an audience I love to speak to. I did a big innovation forum in Norway a while ago, and I'll never forget the energy of that, because the audience give a lot of energy, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's interesting, because there's so much hype around the startup scene in Scandinavia.
Yeah, and
it's good to get that sort of outsider's perspective. Is there anything you think that Scandinavians are doing differently, or a reason for that?
That's the thing, you can't really pinpoint innovation like that. I think it's all in the attitude. It's all about having ideas and actually running with them. And I can just see from the energy and dynamism that that's what they're doing.
Okay, well, thanks very much for joining us here in the live studio at Nordic Business Forum Norway. That was Sahar Hashemi, author and founder of Coffee Republic, now doing a lot of research into entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship. She's going to be on the main stage later in the day. So thanks very much for joining us. I'm just going to give you a little bit more information about what's coming up on the live stream. The next 2 guests we have before we're taking a break are Camilla Hesselund Lastein. She's going to be talking about e-learning experiences, setting up a company, and then after that we have one of the biggest influencers in the Nordics joining us, Isabella Löwengrip. And then we'll be taking a short break and coming back a little bit later with 2 more guests, John Ekman and Simon Sinek, who I know a lot of you are also very much looking forward to speaking to. So, looks like our next guest is in place. Welcome. Thanks very much for being here with us at Nordic Business Forum Norway, live from Oslo 2019. this next interviewee recently ranked in the top 3 business people aged under 25 to watch across Northern Europe. That was by Nordic Business Forum's recent survey. And as I said, made a name for herself by launching an e-learning platform called Lix. Now, you've already been on the main stage kicking off things to start the day, but for anybody who missed your talk, just give us a quick roundup of the main points.
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction. What I talked about was very much about, of course, making an introduction to what we do in Lix, because it's so much more than an e-learning platform. The long-term vision for our company is to change education as we know it today, especially higher education, to make it an e-learning platform that is much more tailored to each individual student and to each individual person's strengths and weaknesses. Also focusing on the collaborative learning experience, etc. And then I talked a lot about the Generation Z, which are our customers, the generation after the millennials, and how they are very, very different in the workplace, especially than the generation before them.
What are the key differences?
It is the top priorities for them in a workplace, where for millennials, it's work-life balance, it's security, and it's very lifestyle focused, whereas in Gen Z, it's much more about purpose and impact. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to see the purpose of why they're doing what they're doing and how they can relate to the company they're working in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go back to a little bit more of your story then. So building up a software company at a relatively young age, give us a summary of your experience and how you felt age factored into that.
I think I dropped out of university, like I also told on the stage, and because of that, I've had to learn everything on my own. And I started the company when I was 20 years old, so I did not have a lot of tools or in my toolbox to use. So I've kind of I needed to learn as I went through the journey of starting a company. And I also told earlier that I went bankrupt with the first company because I had absolutely no idea what I was actually doing.
And you said you felt you'd been a little bit taken advantage of by people sort of seeing you as this young, naive person when you did have a lot of innovative ideas.
Definitely. The first partner I found was kind of a scam, and then I think they exploited the fact that I was very naive and very driven. But I learned a lot from that, and I wouldn't be without that experience today. But yeah, definitely.
So how do you handle setbacks? That kind of disappointment, it would have been so easy to say, okay, it didn't work out. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to get a regular job. What drove you to keep going?
I think that's back to the purpose. And the purpose of why you do what you do is so important, because you need to feel that, I think, that inner fire, that feeling of really you feel driven to make a difference in this field, or you feel passionate about what you do in one or the other way. And I just had this sense of feeling that this industry just needs to change. It can't be any other way. It's absurd to me that less than 5% of textbooks worldwide are digital. And when we use, Netflix and Spotify every single day, it should go that way at least. And then what comes on top of that is just, I think, super exciting to think about. And I think that no-brainer was kind of what it wasn't a question of me if I should go back to study or if I should keep going. It's just a question of how could I get there.
Let's talk about your attitude to work and what is in your toolbox. And one thing I find very interesting is that you hate multitasking. You've spoken vocally about this, and it's so interesting because we're often told we need to get better at multitasking. We need to get better at doing different things, and you have a different approach. Tell us about it and why.
I think so. It actually goes back to a couple of years ago. I was really burned out because I've been working on this company in Lix for 5 years now. So it's been a long time and a long ride so far. And 2 years ago, I kind of hit this point where I felt completely burned out, and I felt really just like things didn't make sense, and it was way harder than it was supposed to be. So I ended up taking not a one-way ticket, but a trip to Cambodia, and ended up at some yoga retreat in the middle of the jungle where we meditated and did yoga for like 7 days straight with no phones, no internet, nothing but a clock and a gong gong. So, but that experience really taught me of, when you focus and when you let yourself, like when you have a focus on the first of all, the mental health, how much that does for you, for your overall well-being, for your performance, for your, when you can get into this state of flow and really just feel like time disappears and you can just work away for hours, accomplishing so much in half the time when you're in this state of flow and focus. And what you do, in my opinion, when you constantly multitask is you never allow yourself to actually deepen within a subject so much that you get into that state. And I think that's where the magic really happens.
How do you deal with digital distractions? The phone going, social media, all the other things that the rest of us are dealing with. You might plan to just spend all day writing that report, but stuff happens.
I don't use it.
You don't use it?
I don't.
So everything's switched off and you're just not a regular user on those platforms?
Yeah, I don't get notifications from... Sometimes I have it on for my email if it's in a really, really busy time, but otherwise I don't, because I don't want that. I don't want my attention to be taken away. I want to control where my attention goes. So I don't use Facebook for anything but events that are planned. I don't use Instagram. I don't use Twitter. I don't use YouTube. I do if I need to figure out how to do something or something like that, or looking for inspiration. But I think it needs to be a conscious choice that you decide not to let it rule your life, because otherwise you're just going to become this, robot that is feeded with all this information that is not necessarily good for you. And often what I realize is when I use Instagram, it actually makes me feel like less of a person. It makes me think less of myself, because all these things influence you. You should have that body, you should have that amount of money, you should have that perfect boyfriend, you should have like all these things. Just becomes this massive bucket list that is, something that you think will make you happy, but in the end you realize it really doesn't.
Yeah, I came off Instagram 18 months ago, and I only go on there when I need to do some work research, rather than, I haven't posted anything.
And how do you feel about that?
A lot better.
Yeah.
But it is interesting when, sometimes you still feel like you've missed out, and people, if you want to find out what's been going on in their jobs or their careers, you have to ask them, and they have to ask you. And so I think it's different ways of building those relationships. But what I'm interested in is, if more people are starting to go this way, then it clearly has an impact on digital marketing. If you're trying to reach new audiences, to sell your products, to get people to sign up. So how will you deal with those challenges?
Are you thinking like in terms of not being able to digitalize?
I mean, in terms of getting your concepts out there. If other people are starting to feel that actually I don't want to be bombarded by information and notifications, then how do you keep communicating your message, your brand, to those people?
The world was working before social media, and there was still advertisement. So I think. Just today, it's still working, but you have, especially this generation, the Generation Z that I talked about today, majority of them have ad blockers. So they don't even see the ads. And, so it's already happening to some degree. That's not social media, but that's the ad part. But those two together is really, I think, poisonous for our, mental well-being.
What do bigger companies and leaders need to think about when managing Generation Z?
They really need, in my perspective, they really need to take this mental health support seriously. Even though when a person, I think we have a little bit of a tendency to label a person that goes down with stress as, oh, they're working too much. When I think what I see in circumstances where a person goes down with stress, it actually has very little to do with their job. Sometimes, definitely, and they work too much and they work themselves like half to death. But most often what I have experienced is that it's because they're not happy in their current situation. They have the wrong job. They do something that doesn't actually, make them feel good, or that, there's so many things where people do it because either they're supposed to, or that's what gives them the paycheck they need every month, and not exploring a little bit more about what they really want to do.
Is that a luxury, though, that we have somewhere like the Nordics, where there's a strong social safety net, where you can go back to school and study, where mental health is less of a taboo subject here? How might that relate to people in other markets, the UK, the US, where that focus on balance and mental health isn't necessarily there yet, especially in these bigger organizations?
Well, fundamentally, I think the education system needs to change, because that has a big toll in a negative direction. I think when you kind of have to, in many markets, have to go through your bachelor and then your master's to even get a certificate. Not even the education or the learning itself, like you growing as a person, but just a certificate to prove that you've been there and you've done it, to go in and get that job. I think that's a really I don't think it's a sustainable model in the long term. I think people need to be more explorative, figuring out what they really like doing, what they're good at, and where that mix up, and pursue it in a different way.
And you and so many other successful entrepreneurs have that backstory of dropping out of university or pivoting. So there are a lot of positive examples out there. I talked a little bit about what managers might need to manage the next generation, but what about the next generation? What skills do you think they need to be developing? If it's not necessarily university degrees and masters, what are the skills that people should be working on now if they're looking to get into the workplace, or people's kids at school right now?
I think for the generation coming into the workforce now, they need to learn to stay present, and that might sound a little like woohoo, but I think staying present and staying focused, and that's also back to the multitasking. It's not that I dislike multitasking. I just like what it does is not really nice. It's not good. So I think, at least what I've learned is when you learn to really focus on something and get into that state of flow in a task or in your job, or whatever you do, if you go play football or dance, or then you focus on that one thing, because the 3-second attention span of this generation really tells us that this is an increasing problem, that you can only, it's like a squirrel, like a puppy syndrome. Oh, that's interesting, now I go do that. And I think this generation as a whole need to practice that, because it will also make them more, I think it will make them better also in the workforce, and at their job and in their career.
Okay.
But that's my opinion, yeah.
Bringing things back to Nordic Business Forum and your position on the list, number 3 out of 25 under 25s. What kind of an impact do you think these lists and rankings can have? How has it affected you and your position? You can be honest. I didn't write the ranking.
I don't know if it affected me in any way. I really appreciate, and I feel really honored to be number 3 on the list, and it's amongst amazing, kick-assing people. So that's a huge honor. I think it's a nice recognition and a shoulder clap for what we do. Yeah. Well, that's really nice, and it's good to know that some people are cheering for us in what we do, because it is a massive challenge to change the education system, because it's so set in stone. It's been there for hundreds of years. So it will take some time, and that encouragement on the way is definitely. It's really appreciated.
Who else do you look up to then, either amongst your peers or in that list, or someone more senior?
I actually don't have any specific. I do follow a couple of people. Usually I like to feel inspired by people that I can feel are true to themselves, so to speak. It's that they do something that they actually care about, and you can tell that they are passionate about it, and they're, and not being in the hamster wheel or the rat race, not doing it for the sake of doing it, but doing it because they actually care. I have a huge respect for that. It's so cliche, but Elon Musk, but that's, who doesn't? Yeah.
Okay, good thought through answers there. So also with Nordic Business Forum this year, 2 key themes amongst a range of topics are purpose, which you've talked about a lot, but also strategy. And you've talked a little bit how you've had to be quite agile and change tactics and look for new partners and things, but how do you strategize your business?
Do you mean from like a...
What are the elements of a great business strategy? What's working for you?
That's a broad question. I think a very clearly defined, mission. So what is our we want to put a man on the moon? That is so tangible, that is so easy to understand that people can imagine it when you say it. And if you have a mission that is so clear, and together with a very easy to understand, actionable plan, together with motivating your team and having especially the right team is hugely important, then I think you can get afar.
So the plan, the actionable plan, you've got your idea, you've got your purpose, you know what you want to do, but it's the planning stage that I think a lot of people with great ideas can get a bit lost in if they don't have that business background. How did you teach yourself those skills?
Yeah, okay. I think you just need to start doing. I think get out and start talk to some people, bounce some ideas off, get some feedback. Don't pretend or don't pretend that you know everything. Be open, be influenceable as a swamp, like what it's called, the squishy things.
A sponge.
Sponge, yes, thank you.
Soak it all up.
Yeah, and then just go do, and like Nike, just do it. But I think a lot. What stops a lot of people is the overthinking it. Like how they want the perfect plan or they want the perfect strategy or something. I think the most important thing is just start executing. That is what sets people aside. Like people that actually do become entrepreneurs, and from people that have ideas, is the execution part. You need to start doing something, and then you'll figure out along the way that you've been doing the wrong thing 100 times, and that's okay. Then you realize that, you figure out how you can do it differently, and you change direction. And that's the only way you can do it. We haven't been going from here to here in a straight line. We have gone, zigzagging so many times. And now when you think back, you're like, oh, I could have done all this in 5 years that I did in 5 years, I could have done in 1 year. We could.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing for,
yes, definitely.
for everyone. So what are the next steps for you? How are you planning to push things further within e-learning, within different universities and different publishers?
Yeah. So we're one of the first companies to push the subscription model in the textbook industry. And since less than 5% of textbooks worldwide are digital today, it's a huge thing. Also for the publishers, but we have really close partnerships with them. And
you're getting more and more on board after some pushing back a little bit initially.
Yeah, it took some years. Definitely. But I think the publishers realize now that we are actually here to help as well. Like we want to help them go into the digital age and address this huge generation that doesn't want physical textbooks. They want digital textbooks. They want digital tools and apps. So how to do that? And we are so hyper user focused and focused on the student, the end user, that I believe that we have the right platform to do it. So this semester start after the summer break, we are launching in the Netherlands and the UK to a selected amount of universities for primarily business schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
But textbooks are only one part of learning.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, people today are learning a lot more with video and audio. So how does your business model fit into those newer ways that are becoming more mainstream? Schools are not just asking kids to sit down and read textbooks. It's much more multimedia.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we have in our platform as well, and are starting to broaden a lot more, focus a lot more on is how can we mediate the same amount of knowledge in a different way? That can be speed reading, it can be YouTube videos, it can be audiobooks, it can be so many different things. So we actually have, if you're a student now and you have your textbook, then you can click on inflation, for example. If you don't understand inflation as a first semester, you get a list of links that is like super short format audio clips or YouTube clips or something else that explains it to you in a different way than it says in the textbooks, because usually authors are paid per word, which means that there's a lot of BS in these textbooks. So we could try and like filter it out.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Makes me want to go back to university. Camilla Lastein, thanks very much for joining us here at the Nordic Business Forum live studio. Now I can see our next guest is getting into place, so I'm just going to give her a bit of an introduction. She's one of the biggest influencers in the Nordics, Isabella Löwengrip, and she's first made a name for herself as a blogger, but now one of the most powerful businesswomen in Sweden, working with beauty, working with investing, and working with entrepreneurship. And we've got the chance to have a very quick chat with her just before she goes live onto the main stage. So welcome. Thanks very much for squeezing us in, Isabella. Just give us a bit of a taster of what you're going to be talking about.
I'm going to talk about how to build the business and your brands on your social media. Because I'm starting with my social media when I was very young, and I've been using them to build the brands, and I keep doing that after 12 years, and I'm the biggest one here in Scandinavia.
So much has changed in those 12 years now. So what are the key tools that you need now that you perhaps didn't need at the beginning?
We need some more people in the team. From the beginning, I could do all the blogging, taking the photos, doing all the writing posts. I could do everything by myself. And today, just working with the social media, we're 12 people, and within 6 months, we're going to be almost like 15 people just working with the social media. And the blog is translated into different language. So it's Arabic, it's French, it's Spanish, and of course English. And the Arabic version is the one growing fastest, so it's very fun.
Okay, so we'll be getting some more niche insights into what you're doing. But what you mentioned is really about evolving, keeping an eye on new trends and new technologies. How do you decide which of the latest technology is relevant for you? And I'm asking this because one thing you have chosen to do is have a digital clone.
Yes, so of course I have to be able to scale up in somehow. And we just have an amount of space in my channels, so we need to start new accounts, of course. So be able to follow like a clone, like an avatar of me, it's one way. But I think it's quite hard to know which platforms that you have to focus on, because they're changing all the time. So my advice is don't stick too much to Instagram or to Facebook or to LinkedIn or to your blog. It's better to be focused just on building your brand. Build a strong brand with a clear message, and then you can just move around your brand. You can use WeChat, you can use Instagram, or you can use whatever you want. Because building a brand is the most important thing.
One thing we've been talking about here in the live studio recently is multitasking and how to manage time but also focus. And you're not just working in the beauty industry, you're also working in entrepreneurship and investing.
I do a lot.
How do you structure all of that? Are there specific measures you put in place every day or every week to keep an eye on everything?
Today it's much more easy, because we're almost 80 people working in our business group. And I have one CEO in each company. So I'm not the CEO by myself everywhere and doing everything. So it's quite structured everywhere. So the only focus I have when I'm waking up in the morning is to work with my social media. Because even when I'm growing, the personal brand is growing worldwide, it's easier for us to launch the companies. So if my blog is even bigger, I'm doing a lot of interviews everywhere. Of course, it's easier for the beauty brand to grow behind. So that's my only thing every day. How can I get more followers, more respond, doing more things?
And keeping the engagement. There have been some discussions about acquisition, maybe in France, other places. Are you thinking of selling? What's going on?
And we get the question all the time. And it's, being on this side, when you're running a beauty company and the big VC firms are asking us to buy some part of the business, it's a fantastic place to be. And the reason why they're coming to us instead of doing the opposite is because we know how to, we are owning our own channels. For example, with L'Oreal, they are huge. They're big brands, but they don't know how to sell their products in their own channels. So they're stuck with the retailers all the time. So they want our knowledge to know how to build a digital brand direct to consumer. And it's quite good to, they're flying us to Paris, we're eating lunch with them, we're meeting LVHM, so it's a great place to be.
Okay, so no firm answers there on sale or not, but I guess watch this space. What do you think or hope the next big beauty trend will be?
So the timing for us is perfect, because we had, for us that loves beauty, we know that K-beauty, Korean beauty, was very big for a lot of years. And today
Just say what that was for those not using
so you don't use K-beauty? So K-beauty is like an Asian Korean beauty with doing a lot of steps. Think about a beautiful geisha, and she has her perfect skin, and then she has to use a lot of products. So it's like 15 steps. It takes like 40 minutes in the bathroom every day. And from women all over the world, they love having the 15 steps with a lot of products. But the timing now and the trends we're seeing right now is that the time is limited, so we need more like clean beauty, fewer steps, more like efficiency within your beauty. So that is why we also want to grow in China, because we see the demand of very simple beauty with high quality and also very clean products. Because the big brands out there, they're doing a lot of, they're squeezing in a lot of bad things into the products. For us, we're doing the recipes by ourselves here in Sweden. And, the stores in China, they love that. So it's going to be so interesting to see if we could take the China market, or a part of it.
And where else do you have your eye on apart from China right now?
So the beauty business, of course, we're selling in Scandinavia. We launched in the US 1 year ago. And the latest now is in Australia. So I just came home from 3 weeks over there just to launch with a beauty retail.
Okay, yeah, great. Well, we need to wrap up and give you a chance to get ready to be on the main stage.
Yeah, I'm going to be on the stage soon. I forgot
And already huge crowds gathering to see you here and get you ready. I just wanted to ask you one last question. You gave some tips on public speaking just before Nordic Business Forum Online, because you are actually a little bit afraid of public speaking, and you've spoken about tips to stay calm. So what's going on right now before you prepare to go on stage?
No, I think that, I've been doing the speeches since I was 18. So it's more when you're switching language and you're speaking in another country, of course. But, you just have to be by yourself. But I just landed 20 minutes ago, so I'm just trying to be calm here.
Good job. Yeah, no, the tips that I saw were about staying calm and staying relaxed and just, focusing on your message. Thank you very much for joining us. Isabella Löwengrip, entrepreneur, blogger, author, and she will be live on the stage in just a few minutes. And we will be back here. You can step down and get ready. We will be back here in around a couple of hours' time, just under 2 hours, with our next two guests, John Ekman, partner at Curamando, and also Simon Sinek. I know a lot of people really waiting to hear from him. Renowned leadership expert, New York Times best-selling author. So he will be here with us for this afternoon's live stream sessions. But for now, thanks very much from me, Maddie Savage, your host here in the live stream studio. As always, we would love for you to get involved in the discussions. Tell us what you think of the guests here and on the main stage on social media using the hashtag NBF Norway. And so please do join us again in a couple of hours. We'll see you then.